Yeah, we're ready.
Yes. Okay. Welcome to the Pop Culture Preservation Society, the podcast for people born in the big wheel generation who thought every day was brought to us by a letter and a number.
We believe our Gen X childhoods gave us unforgettable songs, stories, characters, and images. And if we don't talk about them, they'll disappear, like Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition.
And today, we are saving the show that taught us all about the letters A and K and the numbers 4 and 8, how to be kind and accepting of one another no matter what color your fur was, made us laugh like crazy, and showed us that all kinds of wonderful people lived in our neighborhoods. Sesame Street.
I'm Carolyn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You could do that.
I'm so literal.
I'm Carolyn.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Michelle, and we are your pop culture preservationists. Now you can do it, Kristen. Sunny days. Those of us born between 1965 and 1980 are given the distinction of being called Generation X. And over the past 2 years on this podcast, we've given our generation other names. The Big Wheel Generation, the Brady Bunch Generation, the Tiger Beat Generation. And today, we're adding another one to the list, the Sesame Street Generation. Because many of you probably watched the premiere on November 10th, 1969, and you might even remember it.
I actually have a comment from somebody named Angela on our Instagram feed who says she remembers her mom waking her up in the morning to watch the first episode of Sesame Street.
Oh, that's adorable.
Wow, what a fun memory. I'm sure my mom probably did that too, but I can't honestly say that I remember that.
Oh, no, I do not remember that.
I do remember the moon landing, though, in 1969 that my mom sat me in front of the TV for.
So many wonderful things happened in 1969, didn't it? And I was born.
Sure
They, Michelle.
What else happened?
So, good segue, because many of us were alive, but too young to watch. That's me. And many of you listening hadn't even been born yet. But there's no denying the influence that Sesame Street played in all of our lives. And I'm not talking about the Elmo Sesame Street people. I'm talking about the OG, the Sesame Street of Mr. Hooper and Ladybug Picnic and Kermit and Grover and Ernie, who sounded like Kermit and Grover and Ernie.
That's right. I don't know, these imposters.
Yes.
Yeah. Today you listen to them and you're like, that's not Kermit. But while we definitely today, we could keep speaking to the history, the format, educational goals, response, writing, funding, etc., we want to instead use our time to speak to the connection we all had and still have to Sesame Street.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking as we were preparing for this episode is I think this is the defining, at least television show of our generation. Like, you can ask anyone who is Gen X about Sesame Street and everybody would know. This is not one of those, I don't think I watched that, or we didn't, get that channel or whatever. This is something that we all shared. Maybe one of the only things that I could say I feel consistently across the board that people of our age experienced.
And that's not necessarily true of subsequent generations.
Correct.
Right? Our children don't 100% have memories of Sesame Street. Some watched, some were watching Bob the Builder, right? It's
exactly
not the same as when we were kids.
Exactly.
Right.
It was one of the most consistent parts of our lives, if you think about it. Besides our families, we could count on it every day at the same time. It was there, and those characters were there. And I think that's another reason. It was every day we had the opportunity to interact with these characters.
Right. When I was watching Sesame Street, I lived in a small town, a very rural area, where there were exactly 0 Black people. There were no apartment buildings. There were no front stoops. And Sesame Street was my gateway to understanding that there were other people out there who did not look like me, that I was not the only one who mattered. There were lots of different kinds of people who had important things to say. But my understanding of those differences also was pre-racial. I mean, that's how little I was. I think I just made up the word pre-racial. Because I often wondered what I would look like when I grew up. I was so curious about what I was going to look like when I grew up. And I didn't know, would I look like Jan Brady? Or maybe I would look like Susan from Sesame Street. I didn't know.
Or Prairie
That's
Dawn.
so sweet.
Yeah. Or maybe, yeah. Maybe I would have a felt face.
We don't know. Well, I think along with Mr. Rogers and Electric Company, Sesame Street was the most defining show for me from about age 3, 1972, until I was 6 or 7. I watched it every single day, you guys, even after I started kindergarten, because I had afternoon kindergarten. And I don't doubt at all that Sesame Street is hugely responsible for my early reading and my love of books and words and letters. And I even think, television. It's responsible for my love of television because I adored the funny skits and the colorful graphics. The humans on the show were like my family. The Muppets were real friends to me. I mean, my favorites were and still are Grover. Here I'm wearing my Grover shirt.
Aw.
Ernie and Bert and Snuffleupagus. And in fact, I still have, I don't know if you can see back there, but I still have my Ernie and my Bert. You can see Bert a little bit. I have my Ernie and Bert puppets right here in my office. But I loved everything. I loved the educational videos, like when they showed us how chewing gum was made or how they painted lines in the streets. I was learning from that. And Carolyn, like you just said earlier, it was the people and the familiar skits and the puppets. They were things I could rely on. And just the, the repetitiveness of everything was just hugely important to me at that, from age 3 to 6.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my mom was sitting me down in front of Sesame Street when I was like 12 months old. I'm pretty sure. I don't think she waited until I was 3.
Right. No, and I'm sure I was too. It's just
I'm
my
not
memory
knocking you,
of
Linda.
it. But it's my memory of it can start at about age 3. Well, unlike most children's television programs at the time, the producers of Sesame Street decided against using a single host, and instead they cast a group of ethnically diverse actors. They wanted them to have distinctive personalities and be reliable characters for the children. When Sesame Street began in 1969, you guys, there were just 4 people in its cast. Can you name them?
I can now, but when I first saw that in our outline, I was like, what? Four people. But when I really drilled down, it became very obvious. There were some obvious people. So, Carolyn, did you pin it?
No, I did not.
Well, let's find out if I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
Gordon and Susan, Mr. Hooper, and Bob.
That's correct. And I think where I was getting confused is because in 1970 we add some more in, right? We add in Miguel and Louie and Maria. And
wait, Luis.
Sorry, let's do it again. And because in 1970 we add some more characters in 1970 that in my memory were always there, right? So I want to tell you, wait, let me just start back there. So Mr. Hooper was the first human cast on Sesame Street. He was played by Will Lee, beloved Mr. Hooper, right? We loved Mr. I also have a shirt that says Hooper's Store on it. That I get these on TeePublic, you guys. Just listeners, if you're interested, they have a lot of great Sesame Street tees. In the late 40s, I think this is so interesting. In the late 40s, Mr. Hooper, Will Lee, had been blacklisted by the House Committee on Un-American Activities for his refusal to name any fellow actors as communists. We've all heard about that, right? He was one of them.
Wow.
Yeah, so he had been unemployed. He had been unemployed for years, and then he was hired in 1958 on As the World Turns, and then, 11 years later on Sesame Street. And actually, people really give Joan Gance Cooney a lot of credit for hiring one of the former blacklisted actors for that. So that's Mr. Hooper.
So they thought Mr. Hooper was a commie.
Well, back in the late 40s.
Yeah. Right.
I know. And I love this one. I agree. You can date, we're going to take that out, but you can actually date, I think, yourself by the Gordon you remember.
Oh, yes.
Because there wasn't always the same Gordon. He was originally played by Matt Robinson, and he resigned in 1972 only because he was a behind-the-scenes guy. He was a puppeteer. They kind of grabbed him at the last minute because their test Gordon hadn't worked out so well. And they were like, He voiced Matt Robinson voiced Roosevelt Franklin.
Roosevelt Franklin,
yeah.
What do you say?
And he was a puppeteer.
A, B, C,
and they said,
D, E, F, G. Just had to get that out.
So they grabbed him and said, "Do you want to be Gordon?" He said, "Sure, why not?" So it was fine, but after a couple of years, he was like, "This isn't for me, being in front of the camera."
I don't like Susan.
And then they had someone named Hal Miller stepped in for a year. But then the Gordon came who I associate Gordon with, and that's Roscoe Orman, and he played Gordon until 2016. So he's my Gordon.
This is so funny. Because my Gordon is Gordon number one, and
Okay.
I have a lot of feelings about Gordon. I would say Gordon is probably my number one character, which is probably a little surprising. But I also struggled with Gordon because he was the only character whose actor was switched out. And I was not able to understand what was happening. I did not know they were actors. I thought they were real people.
Well, of course.
Right.
One day Gordon shows up and I'm like, what's wrong with Gordon? And then not only does he have a completely different face one day, but then his afro falls off. And I'm just like, what? Can that actually happen? Like, can you wake up with a different face one day? But I think Gordon's number one status for me is based completely on Matt Robinson, the afro mustache and beard Gordon. And he took, can I expand on this? Is that okay, Michelle?
Please, yeah.
Or do you want to
please.
move on? Okay.
No.
He took his role very seriously because he, like you said, he was a puppeteer and he had been brought into this project, Sesame Street, and he felt he was to be a positive role model for Black children who lacked a strong father figure. And I'm telling you, that worked on me. Even though I had a completely intact family, I felt very comforted and protected by Gordon number one. So then when Gordon number one left in 1972, do you guys know who was in the running for Gordon? To be Gordon number two? That would be Robert Guillaume. Benson.
Oh, I could see that.
Oh, I guess.
Benson was going to be Gordon.
I could see that. Because he was a lot younger then.
He was a lot younger. But instead, they chose Hal Miller, like you said. And then Gordon number three, you said, was your Gordon, Michelle. So Gordon number three was the bald Gordon. The afro fell off. And he left in 1976 to join the cast of All My Children as a pimp named Tyrone. Which I totally remember. I remember Tyrone. I'm watching
remember
All
that
My
name
Children.
too.
Yeah, he was Estelle's pimp. And I remember not knowing what a pimp was, but he was very flamboyant and I knew that was bad.
Right.
Like somehow this guy was bad.
What a
You keep saying
strange casting. I was just going to say, what is strange,
Yeah.
like going from Sesame Street to All My Children as a pimp? Because if you're a kid walking around the house or whatever, and all of a sudden your mom's watching All My Children, and you're like, but that's Gordon, and he's wearing like
he's
this
my
weird
dad.
hat, and
He's my dad.
yeah.
But let's be clear,
that's-
I was watching All My Children. And he was
Well, I'm also thinking that you're 8 watching All My Children.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it might be on in the background, is what I'm thinking. Like maybe that was your mom or your grandmother's watching the soap, and you do this double take, and like,
Okay,
oh
but
my
we-
gosh.
But we do have some confusion because you said Roscoe Orman played it until 2016. Did he play Gordon and Tyrone at the same time, maybe?
Maybe he left for a little bit. I'd have to get
that's
out. You guys, I
bizarre.
wanted to, and this is a good place that I can share. So I have this really great book. It's so giant. It doesn't even fit in my screen. If this part's on YouTube or something, you can see it. But it's this great giant Sesame Street coffee table book that was published in 2009 for the 40th anniversary. It is an amazing resource. It's like an Sesame Street encyclopedia. I'm going to post some photos from the book on social media this week. But you can still get it. I saw that it's still available on Amazon. It's kind of pricey, though. It's like $70. I got it as a Christmas gift, 10, 12 years ago. But it's fantastic. And the pages are just thick, that lovely thick, coffee table book page, but that's where I was getting a lot of my information from. So I'd have to flip it through, but I don't know. We can fact check that, Kristen.
Well, and
see.
yeah, some people can help us fact check. They love to tell us when we've said something
Every
wrong.
Every time you say he lost his afro, I'm imagining the woolly, the little thing that you'd play in car trips with the little magnet with all the little metal shavings that you could
Make the beard and
you could
hair.
make the beard and you could make a little afro and then you could turn it up and it would fall right off. You could make Gordon 1 and Gordon 2 on
That's
your
right.
wild
Oh,
woolly
it was
wild
so
woolly.
it was so hard for me. I'm just looking at that face, going, "What happened to Gordon?"
And then years later, you probably went
confusing.
through the same thing on Bewitched.
Oh, and that one I just had to go with. I'm like, there were two people. There were.
Yeah.
She married somebody named Darren, and then she married somebody else named Darren.
Oh, is that what you thought? It was a second
I
husband.
did.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought, what is the chances of he had the same name?
So then moving on, Gordon's,
Okay.
his wife, Susan, was played by Loretta Long, and she's the only OG who is still on Sesame Street, or at least she still was a year or two ago. There's been a sad, Sesame Street has a really
what
sad
is it now?
story
I
now.
don't even know.
Listeners, we're not going to use today to go into that, but it's even been taken off. Then it was only available on HBO, which was so awful, and now it's even been pulled on HBO. So where can you even watch Sesame Street? I don't know, but that's not what today is an episode celebrating Sesame
That's
Street.
right.
So we're going to leave that for you guys can find out that information on your own. But Loretta Long was hired to play Gordon's wife, Susan. They originally wanted a real folksy character. They wanted her to be like a Joan Baez type. And she was waiting to audition, and they just kept passing her over. And finally, at the end, she's like, I came here to sing for y'all, right? Like, let me sing. And she starts singing I'm a Little Teapot, completely like a cappella, as if she's singing it to a child. And the story is, that was it. Everybody was like, oh, like this, like they could see that connection that she would have with children instantly. And she was hired to play Susan, who became a really important and influential role model on Sesame Street, if you think about it. I mean, she started as a stay-at-home mom, which they said, they were a little worried at first about the feminists and everything, but just in some of the stuff I've read, if I'm remembering this correctly, they still made her very motherly and everything. But then, Susan goes on to become, I think it's a nurse, right? Doesn't she go on to become a nurse? Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, Loretta Long, the actress who plays her, has her PhD. She's Dr. Loretta Long because she has her PhD in education.
Oh, my God. No wonder she knew how to sing My Little Teapot. What's it called?
I'm a Little Teapot.
No wonder she knew how to sing I'm a Little Teapot in a way that actually connects with children, not in a performance style.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then, of course, Bob's my like Kristen, you said, Gordon is your kind of most memorable. Bob for me was my constant. Bob was just friendly, and Bob played by Bob McGrath, who sadly we just lost last fall. He passed away in the fall of 2022. And his story is so funny because he became so beloved so fast on Sesame Street and was on for so long. He was just such a constant on that show for so many of us. But when he was originally approached for this show, he wasn't interested in the least. He was already a singer. He was a vocalist. That's what his path he thought was. But a few months later, he saw Jim Henson's work and he totally changed his mind. And he said, this is something really special and I want to be a part of it.
And then he has the same job for like 54 years or something.
But you know what? If you love what you do, right? I mean, he was so good at it. Right? You guys, even when he
Kristen, kind of like you were saying earlier, I wanted to literally be on Sesame Street, not necessarily the TV show. I just wanted to live there, that you could walk to the store, that your neighbors could be that close to you, that you could just get everywhere, because I grew up, in suburban Houston in a pre-planned subdivision where you had to get in your car to go anywhere. And the thought of just like running into a neighbor as you're walking to the store. I mean, like I'm just jaunting my way to the store now, jauntily. Oh, I just love that. I mean, even when we looked for a house here when we were moving to Minneapolis, I said, I want to be able to walk to a store. That was one of the qualifications for my
It's
house.
my number one qualification.
And if you could throw in a post office too, more power to you. That was like,
it was everybody for me. It was everybody hanging out on their stairs, sitting on the stairs to their house.
Mm-hmm. Community. There was just this sense of community that once we had these ranch houses and yards and all of that, you weren't necessarily out in that close proximity to people on a regular basis. And I just wanted that. I really did.
That's so interesting. That's a really good story, Carolyn, because like I said, when I was watching Sesame Street, I lived in this rural area, and there was a store called I called it the Pink Store because it was pink. Now I'm thinking, do I really know the name of the store? And we thought maybe it's walkable. Let's try. And so a whole bunch of neighborhood kids got together and we schlepped to the Pink Store. And I remember getting home with blisters and it was not walkable. But did that plant a seed? Like I was just dying to go to the Pink Store and buy some bubble gum, and it wasn't walkable. And now I've rarely lived in a place where I can't walk to a store.
Yeah. I think Sesame Street influenced us, and everyone was so happy and cared about each other. And
well, like I said earlier, so that was those four characters were the original in 1969, and then in 1970, obviously, because I know some of you were screaming at your devices. What about Miguel? What about Luis and Maria? What about Molly the mail carrier? Did you guys know Molly the mail carrier was played by Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett from Facts of Life?
Oh my God!
She has like dark hair. I would have never known that.
What?
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't really remember Molly the mail carrier until I watched some skits with her in it. And then I was sort of like, she was friends with Bob. I don't think she was on it a ton, but she was a recurring character starting in 1970.
And see, people were friends with the mail carrier.
Yes.
You know,
Yes, they
in
were.
suburbia, you just
Who
went
are the
to.
people in your neighborhood?
Yeah. And when we moved again to Minneapolis, we had a walking mailman. I was just in heaven. I had never had a mailman that walked before that I knew his
Well,
name.
hopefully
Like
they
my
all
mail.
walk, but- yeah.
Yeah. I never did. They were always in a little vehicle, and then it was awful. And we can take this out, but in Houston, when they built these new subdivisions, this is when I'm an adult, they just had like in the middle of one cul-de-sac, they had all these little boxes and you had a key. So when the mailman or mail carrier came, they just deposited it all there. But so I just loved the coziness of the mail carrier coming to your door, putting the mail in. Our one here, we knew his name, gave him real Christmas presents.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We
so
got,
nice.
when we moved, and again, we're taking this part out, but when we moved to New Hampshire, the mail carrier bought presents for Liam. And I thought, and it was really quite heartbreaking because I was moving to a place where there were no sidewalks and they delivered the mail in a truck. I'm just putting this together now. They did not walk up to our door and give us the mail. I couldn't walk to a store. And the pain of leaving this neighborhood was almost unbearable. And I remember when she handed over those gifts, I'm like, that doesn't happen other places.
No.
People don't know their mail carrier.
Okay, we ready to move on? Yeah. All right. So, besides the adult humans, there were many other important humans on Sesame Street, and that would be the children. Now, this comes from Wikipedia, you guys, but I loved how it was put so much, I didn't edit it. I'm just going to read it.
Okay.
According to the Children's Television Workshop's research, children preferred watching and listening to other children more than to puppets and adults. I don't know about that, but... So, they included children in many scenes. Dave Connell probably, insisted that no child actors be used, so these children were non-professionals, unscripted, and spontaneous. Many of their reactions were unpredictable and difficult to control, but the adult cast learned to handle the children's spontaneity. Flexibly, even when it resulted in departures from the planned script or lesson. CTW, Children's Television Workshop, research also revealed that the children's hesitations and on-air mistakes served as models for the viewers. And what comes to mind instantly, for me at least, after reading that, is that one famous sketch from the 70s where it's the little girl, her name's Joey, and Kermit. And he's trying to get her to say the ABCs with him, and she keeps interrupting him with Cookie Monster. And then she just laughs her head off over and over. And apparently that was all her. That they were supposed to sing the ABCs together. And if you go back and watch it, it's all over YouTube, listeners. You can find it. Just put Joey and Kermit ABCs. Kermit, Jim Henson, handled it beautifully. So here's the adult. And I think that puts into practice everything I just read.
Yeah.
That they wanted their hesitations and on-air mistakes to serve as models because that's what kids did. Yeah. She thought it was hilarious to just keep going, Cookie Monster. And when and Kermit was kind of, scrunching his little face up like, and then she would just laugh her head off at him. I don't know.
The brilliance of Jim Henson / Kermit to be able to be like her handler and like, where do I go from here? I mean, that's some serious improvisation on their part. Right. But I think this decision to use non-actors was pivotal.
Yeah.
Because their foibles are adorable, even to other children. There's nothing worse than a child actor trying to be cute, right? No. And that's the difference between Sesame Street and Barney. No offense, Selena Gomez. And that endeared them to us, even as children. So we could then open our ears and fully understand what they might be thinking and feeling and learning in a way that you wouldn't from somebody who was delivering lines and going, hee hee hee.
Yeah, that was all scripted. And I don't know about you guys, but I thought I could maybe be one of those kids. Like I thought maybe if I go to New York or audition or whatever, I could be on there. I could do that.
Mm-hmm. I actually have that almost exactly word for word in my notes, Carolyn. I don't know about you guys, but I just loved the children and any skit where the children got to interact with a Muppet. And to your point, Kristen, because they weren't those kind of obnoxious, over-scripted child actors, that's what made us believe we could be we could be one of them.
Yes.
And that's what made this whole show so relatable to us, because sometimes the children are kind of looking at the Muppet like, what's happening to me right now next to me? And that's how we felt sometimes at age 3. Looking,
Sure.
Cookie Monster or Grover can be kind of loud and kind of puzzling. And sometimes the kids kind of clam up. They don't say what they're supposed to say. And the Muppet, does such a good job of bringing that child out of their shell every single time. And even if it gets them to just say 1 or 2 words or letters, that was so relatable. And to me, it was like the best kind of make-believe magic come to life. And like you said earlier, I desperately, desperately wanted to be a child on Sesame Street. I don't know if it wasn't as much as I wanted to live on a street like that. I wanted to be surrounded by those humans and by those puppets.
And those beautiful puppets.
Oh,
Are we going to talk about John John later, or should I bring that up now?
You can bring. I didn't. I actually skipped it because I didn't put it in. So why don't you talk about it now?
John John, I think, might be the universal favorite of the children on the show.
The cheeks.
And there's that, oh God, the cheeks of John John. And the skit with him trying to count with Grover. 1, 2, 3. I mean, I'm not going to do it. We're going to put it in. And did you guys, I'm sure you've seen this. No, wait. Start over, Kristen. Even as a child, I thought John John was cute. So I may have been, a year older than John John? I wasn't that much older. But even when I'm 4 years old or 5 years old, I want to hug John John.
Your first crush.
Oh my God, John John might have been my first crush. I love it. I want to kiss his little cheeks. And then I'm sure you've seen this, the video of adult John John counting with Grover.
Oh, it's so cute.
We should put that in our newsletter.
Let's do it, yeah.
I can watch that 100 times.
Yeah.
Side by side with little John John. And he's wearing like a military uniform.
Well, I was
He's
just
all
about to
grown
say
up.
that. He became really successful. He was on Sesame Street for many years. I think because he changed, he might have lost some of the cheeks. We might not have recognized that 6-year-old was actually John John. I read a fun story that said one time, I don't know if it was when he was dating the person who became his wife or if it was just a girlfriend. I think it was the person who became his wife. When she found out who he was, she immediately said, "The cheeks! I loved your cheeks." Isn't that cute?
Imagine.
Is so adorable and memorable. Like nobody will ever forget John John.
No.
I wish I could imitate it right now, but I can't.
I know. Well, we'll put some of it in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can't talk about the characters of Sesame Street without mentioning the most important, and we have a little bit, but the Muppets.
Like
now,
Felix and Oscar is Bert and Ernie.
Yeah, Bert is Felix.
Yeah.
Okay, you still have about 6 or 7 more. Just start thinking outside the box.
Oh my God. Okay, I know Grover. We haven't said Grover yet.
Well, Grover was, interestingly enough, and listeners, go look this up, and maybe we'll put a link or I'll put a photo on social media this week. Grover was, but he was not fully formed until season 2. So the first iterations of Grover were him and like the first, puppets they were making. It looks very Grover-like, but it's not this Grover. So
it's like a fur dress.
Kind of. But he was on season. He did show up in season 1. Yes.
Okay, of course we have Roosevelt Franklin.
Roosevelt
Wasn't he in
Franklin.
season one? Okay.
Yep.
What do
He
you
was
say?
that cool kid. He was on seasons 1 through 7. Cool kid who loved scat, rhyme, and to sing the blues.
What do you say?
I don't even know anymore. I mean, those are the.
Here, I'll give you a hint. If I start talking like this, hi, my name is Michelle. Hi.
What is she doing?
That's not the newscaster person.
I'm Guy Smiley.
Guy
Guy Smiley,
Smiley. Oh, Guy
You know how his
Smiley.
bottom, he's
Yes.
like on a
Yes.
hinge? Hi.
Yes.
I'm Guy
And his
Smiley.
head, the top of his head goes up instead of his chin going down.
Guy Smiley's America's favorite game show host, don't forget. He had like that frantic level of excitement and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Some of the shows he hosted on Sesame Street were Beat the Time, Here Is Your Life, and What's My Part? Okay, do you want me to give you just some of the other characters that
there are a
appeared?
lot of people that I don't
season
know
1?
their names. Like I can picture them, but I don't know that they had names. And there was one guy with a perfectly round head, and he had a big mustache, and he had a ring of hair, which is it's a hairstyle you don't see anymore because
Is that the blue hair?
Yeah, he's blue.
That's Mr. Johnson, and we're going to talk about him next week
okay.
in the Grover skits.
Okay.
But Mr. Johnson was not in season 1 yet.
And before we get to let me know when you want me to talk about Roosevelt Franklin because he was my favorite.
Okay, I will. Let's. Well, why don't you talk about Roosevelt Franklin right now, and we'll put that.
Okay.
We'll cut that part and put it right after you said,
After the
well,
Roosevelt
Roosevelt
Franklin
and
part.
after I say he loved to scat, rhyme, and sing the blues, and now you jump in.
He, of all the Muppets, Roosevelt Franklin is my favorite Muppet. And I know you guys are looking at me like, what?
But that's so cute, because I think it's so cute that I mean, we all
I
liked
love
Roosevelt Franklin, but I love that he was someone's favorite.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. He knew everything. It wasn't just his ABCs. He knew how to count. He knew the days of the week. And he was, like you said earlier, Michelle, he was created by Gordon #1, and he was voiced by him too. And even after Gordon #1 left the show, he continued to write and voice Roosevelt Franklin. But like you said, he was dropped, I think after 7 seasons or something. Even though he was wildly popular, but people were worried that this classroom of rowdy children that Roosevelt Franklin was often the ringleader of, trying to teach them how to sing the ABCs. They thought those rowdy children set a bad example, and that he may have been portraying a negative African American stereotype, which I disagree. But also, I'm not an authority on the subject, so shut your mouth. Or people thought he was too black, or some people thought he was not black enough. So Roosevelt Franklin was a lightning rod, but he still kept making cameos on Sesame Street even after they dropped him.
Oh, that's good to know.
That is good to know.
Because people loved him.
Yeah.
People loved him.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm listening to you, Kristen. Don't think I'm thinking while you're talking. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking that, I don't know if I'd say my favorite, but the character that sticks with me the most is Oscar the Grouch. And I think this is telling of my personality, because I just wanted Oscar to be happy. I felt so sad for Oscar. Like, what made him so sad? Why was he so grumpy with everyone? Like, which kid on there is really gonna snap him out of it? Like, put me on the show.
Yeah.
I'll make Oscar happy. And that just always was with me. Like, this will be the episode where he's really excited and happy and not always grouchy.
Do you guys remember
was your
how-
dad grouchy?
Was my dad?
Was your dad grouchy?
No, my mom was grouchy.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Do you guys remember how exciting it was, the episodes where we got to go down into Oscar's trash can and see what it looked like? I lived for those episodes. It was so
Carolyn just
fun.
turned inside out.
Yeah, Carolyn just like became boneless. She's like, yes, I loved it so much. And little Slimy, remember Slimy appeared in
Yes.
was Slimy in season 2. But you guys, also one thing that is so brilliant about the creators of Sesame Street, and all of us with our education backgrounds, we understand this and we appreciate this, is, the character of Oscar the Grouch could be grouchy all the time, but yet anytime Oscar's interacting with someone else, they're just kind of like joking, don't be such a grouch, but it's just they let him be a grouch. And so as a child watching it, you're getting this reflection of sometimes I can be a grouch and that's okay, right?
And
It
people
doesn't
won't
mean the
get mad
people
at
around
me.
me aren't going to still love me. And it was, I think, Oscar was a really intentional character on this show, I would assume.
Well, and the placement of Slimy is also incredibly intentional, because you have this grouchy dude, but his relationship, I'm talking so specifically
I know
about Slimy, but his relationship with Slimy, welcome to book club, shows that he has heart. So he's not a bad person. He's just in a bad mood. but
Slimy.
Yes, he was so warm and caring with Slimy.
Like maternal kind of, paternal with Slimy, yeah. Oh my gosh,
Which
you're
is a
so
good lesson
right.
for all of us.
But see, again, here we are on this podcast, going back at through our 50-something-year-old lenses, able to see things that we saw. We loved the friendship between Oscar and Slimy, but we might not have been seeing, like, now this was very pointed to show that he's a grouch, but he does have a good heart, and this is just his exterior, and maybe this is just how he has to project.
Yeah.
Oscar could have used some therapy. There should have been a therapy.
Well, let me tell you guys, it's just my therapy, and we'll take all of this out, but all the stuff I'm working on in therapy is coming. It's making sense now why I felt that way about Oscar. Because you just made the comment about Sesame Street did this intentionally. Like, it's okay to be grouchy. Yeah. I never thought it was okay to be grouchy.
No, I didn't
So
either.
I'm still working with that. It's okay to feel the feeling. Like, that's not a negative feeling. Like, all feelings are just feelings. I thought it was my job to get rid of the grouch
same.
or the sad.